happy little games. Before we get started, be sure to leave a like if you enjoy any of my content. Also, let me know down below what games you think I should cover. Thanks. The Run and Gun game. Any retro gaming fan of this genre will instantly think of Green Beret, Contra, or Metal Slug. Thanks to Hollywood movies featuring Hollywood heroes such as Rambo and John Matrix from Commando, this new genre took off, no pun intended, like a shot. You couldn't just have a lone soldier on his way to take out an entire country as the backdrop, you also had to have a rock-solid game to back it up. Today, we are going to take a look at another unique spin on the run and gun concept that was released way back in 1989. The hero of this game wore a bandana and kicked not only the butts of every enemy they encountered, but also infiltrated our hearts as well. No, I'm not talking about the adventures of Big Bad Bertha. I'm talking about Midnight Resistance by Data East. What innovation did this game use? What were the differences in the home versions of this game? So STFU and grab your BFG because this is the history of Midnight Resistance. The year is 1988 and arcade manufacturer Data East is looking to create another run and gun classic. By this point, Data East had become a powerhouse in the arcade industry, releasing such classics as Karate Champ, Kung Fu Master, Bad Dudes, and RoboCop.
You are under arrest.
Thank you.
In 1987, the company released Heavy Barrel. This was an overhead view run and gun and featured an 8-way rotating joystick similar to SNK's previous arcade title Atari Warriors. Movies such as Rambo and Commando were still hot commodities, especially in Japan, so designer Koji Akibayashi had the idea to create a sequel to Heavy Barrel, but this time use a side perspective similar to Contra, only with a rotating joystick. Midnight Resistance blasted its way into the arcades in 1989. This is a simultaneous 2-player co-op run-and-gun action extravaganza in which you take on the role of 2 unnamed brothers who just happen to look like Frank and Sylvester Stallone. You take control of your steroid-induced hero as he sets out to rescue his grandfather, mother, father, sister, and possibly even his brother from another mother, from the evil clutches of the alien known as King Crimson. The home versions would change the story a little, but I'll get to those in just a bit. Every arcade game should have a hook that would bring people in, and this game it would be the rotating joystick. This allowed you to aim in an independent direction while moving in another. The game was designed with this feature in mind, as the enemies will come at you from all directions, so this joystick definitely comes in handy. As I mentioned, this control scheme was done with Atari Warriors and the prequel to this game, Heavy Barrel. This was the first time it had been done with a side-scroller similar to Contra. The game takes place across 9 levels with various sub-bosses all throughout. Another unique aspect of this game, along with the rotating joystick, were the keys. The concept of the keys were introduced in Heavy Barrel, but it was fine-tuned here and is a nice little break from the chaotic gameplay. These are dropped by various enemies, and you would need to collect them to unlock chests to gain additional firepower. You can carry up to 6 keys at once, which can be redeemed at the end of each stage in the weapons armory. The last time I saw so many keys, I was at a key party. The weapons that you can choose are the 3-way or spread shot, flamethrower, rapid fire machine gun, shotgun, homing missiles, and nitro flares. You can also equip secondary backpack weapons which do a ton of damage. The 2 backpack weapons are Barrier, which provides 3 satellites above your player and protects you, and the Shower, which will rain bullets from above. If you lose a life, you do lose your keys and weapons, but you are respawned right next to them, so it's easy to pick them back up. The level design is varied with detailed graphics and lots of colors on screen. There is some nice, smooth, sexy parallax scrolling on most of the levels as well. The sprites are just as detailed with smooth animation. The music is quite catchy and is definitely something you will remember. The sound effects and voices are top-notch as well. The sub-bosses are extremely large, but thankfully they are not too difficult to deal with. The controls are top-notch, especially when playing on an actual arcade machine. The levels you will encounter are Outer Complex, Inside the Complex, The Forest, The Caves, Into the Lair, The Caves Part 2, The Docks, Vertical Climb, and The Belly of the Beast. Some of these sub-bosses that you will face are tanks, a giant buzzsaw, jet fighters, the Electrified Man, a giant naval ship, and the final boss, which is a huge floating head and could be mistaken for my wife.
Homing missile.
Before facing off against the final boss, you have the option of unlocking your family if you have enough keys saved up.
Thank you.
Fire.
Thank you.
Fire.
Thanks, Rose.
Full auto.
Bless you.
Homing missile.
Once you defeat the boss, you climb to safety with your family while a nice melodic tune plays in the background. The game was very successful in both Japan and North America, so naturally the conversions would soon follow. Ocean Software released the title with development house Special Effects in charge of the home computer ports, while Data East themselves took care of the Sega Genesis version. None of the home conversions were able to replicate the rotating joystick, so changes had to be made. The Xenix Spectrum version is first on our list, and boy oh boy is there some serious color clash going on. Everything is large and quite detailed if you can actually make it out. The scrolling has also been sacrificed using a flick screen mode instead of the nice smooth scrolling found in the arcade and other home conversions. The storyline has also been changed for all of the home computer ports. In these versions, a ruthless commissar has kidnapped your family, which includes your grandfather, who was a world-famous research scientist. You have to rescue them in time before Gramps gives up the goods and reveals his secrets to the evil commissar. No idea why this was changed. All of the levels have been included, as well as the cutscene halfway through the game and also the ending sequence. We do get music while we play, and while the tunes aren't the greatest, with the occasional queef slipping in and out here and there, it still sounds pretty good for the Spectrum. It's also only single player. Sticking with the 8-bits, let's take a look at the Amstrad version. This was ported over from the Spectrum, which is unfortunate because I believe the machine can do much better than this. The added splash of color really does help, but the problem lies with the speed. While not too terribly slow, the gameplay is just not arcade accurate. Similar to the Spectrum though, everything else from the arcade game made it over. The one area where it suffers is the sound. If you are looking for short, sweet queefs right in your face, then this is the version for you. Playing it on the emulator and cranking up the speed by 60%, it made the game so much more playable. Again though, it's only a single player affair. Fun. The good old Commodore 64 version is up next, and what a conversion it is. The graphics are a bit on the chunky side, and the colors are a bit of a mess. It's also not quite as detailed as the other versions, but it does feature the arcade smooth scrolling. Another huge advantage is the use of the SID chip, and it sounds fantastic. Even though the graphics are a bit on the average side, the playability more than makes up for it, as it actually feels like the arcade game except for the rotating joystick. Everything from the arcade made it over, including the cutscenes and the ending. Unfortunately though, it's only a single player game. The Atari ST version looks good with graphics similar to the arcade game. The backgrounds are detailed along with the sprites, but the problem comes with the colors, as everything has a washed out look to it. Another problem is the scrolling, which uses a flip screen method and not the smooth as butter scrolling found in the arcade game. Something else that has been sacrificed is the sound. This is now also a single player game as well. Overall, not a bad conversion, just not very good either. The Amiga version is up next, and it is the best home computer version in my opinion. Graphically, it's very similar to the Atari ST, but with a bit more color on screen. Everything does appear to be washed out, although not as bad as on the ST. The scrolling is silky smooth, just like in the arcade original. The sound effects and music have been transferred over nicely to the Amiga, and we even get some of the voices from the arcade game. The controls feel great and also features the beloved 2-player co-op mode, something no other version, even the Sega Genesis, offers. The Sega Genesis version was the only port handled by Data East themselves, and despite some loss in color, looks very close to the arcade original. Once again, the story has been changed even further, with your family being kidnapped by the dastardly Crimson King. He is a drug lord who has kidnapped your grandfather, in particular for work he has done on a serum to stop drug addiction. Your unnamed character from the arcade game has now been rechristened Johnny Ford, who was a member of the Narcotics Control Agency. The sprites are extremely large and detailed, with the same boss designs found in the arcade game. The level design is almost perfect, with nice smooth parallax scrolling as an added bonus. Some of the backgrounds aren't quite as detailed as found in other versions, which is a bit strange. Of course, we get music and sound effects while we play, and although I prefer the Amiga sound for this game, the Genesis version isn't too bad, although it is missing all of the voices. The playability feels great with tight control over your player. Surprisingly, it's only a single player affair. And that takes care of the history of Midnight Resistance. This game doesn't get mentioned quite as often when it comes to the run and gun genre, but I think it should be, as it's a lot of fun. Due to the rotating joystick, the best version to play is the arcade original, as it hasn't been properly replicated on the home front. If you've never had a chance to blast some baddies and collect some keys, then you should definitely check this game out. You'll be glad you did. Please check out my sister channel, Patman QC, History of Everything Retro, which covers various retro items from my youth not directly related to video games. If you enjoyed this content or any of my content, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Also, if you would like to support me on Patreon or just send a donation through PayPal, check the links below. Thank you everybody for watching.